afternoon. I'm joined by Helen and Gary, and we're going to be talking about loneliness and the sense of disconnection that can make us feel separate. We've had some lovely questions already put forward from the Facebook group that we created in the last couple of weeks. So hopefully we're going to tackle those too, but do feel free to chip in if you've got any other questions that come up throughout the conversation. So I'm going to hand over now to Helen and Gary to start the chat.
Yeah, well, a couple of those questions actually were about what do we mean by loneliness. So that's maybe quite a useful place to start. So Lizzie was saying she's randomly been having the same conversation with her mum, and talking about her mum's perspective was about not having anything to look forward to, whereas for Lizzie it was more about being disconnected from an individual or from a group, or just feeling that isolation. So postnatal depression or depression are times when people often feel it, but obviously that's in the extreme, and then there are those smaller times when you feel isolated and that loneliness. And then apologies, I might get your name wrong, but it looks like Cleverlise made a really good point about loneliness versus being alone, and what part that plays. So that distinction might be useful to kind of sort of be clear on what is it we're talking about here? What's loneliness? What is that experience?
When did you feel most alone in your life?
Yeah, that's the point where
when do you feel most lonely?
They're two very different things for me. Because and there's something which I'll put in the show notes as well, which that became part of the conversation on the Facebook group around. The distinction seemed to be that loneliness is where there's a fear and where there's a sense of that separation and just not okayness, versus being alone where really that's when you're perfectly okay in your own company, whether you're with others or not. Like, I'm just fine as I am. And it made me think of people who might say, I can't bear my own company. Like, I'd see that as people who don't like to be alone, whereas there are others who love to be alone and are perfectly happy, versus loneliness where it becomes a tension and I'm not okay. There's a fear, there's a danger to it, like I'm really not safe in this experience.
And maybe loneliness is also more about not the actual physical state of being, but the narrative. It's that overlay in our minds that's playing out, that's saying, oh my God, you could be with a group of friends perhaps, but feel a sense of loneliness because you feel like, oh, they just don't get me, or I'm not part of this. And then you're making a lot of meaning about what's playing out that is really subjective, yet it feels very, very real, doesn't it?
I suppose I have a lot of feelings of disconnected in my life, or not feeling part of it in a way. There was always a lot of my stories revolve around my kind of early age trauma, don't they? So that after my father died, there was looking back, I just felt constantly disconnected from things, but it was more a sense of disconnecting myself rather than I was disconnected, and not feeling accepted by people around me. But obviously now we're coming from a position of hindsight, of being able to look back and know that was a story and a narrative and a feeling of disconnect. But also, there's also that. For me, it's always been the feeling of part of me is not here, part of me is missing. It's not complete. It was always that for me about loneliness. It was the absence of something inside of me. Because being alone on my own, no problems with that whatsoever. I can be on my own all day, I like being on my own all day. And being in my own space and having my own company has always been okay for me. So that doesn't really bother me as much. But that feeling of disconnect and not feeling complete and whole, that was something that really kind of ate away for a long time.
That really rings true for me, what you said then about an absence of something. I remember feeling when I was in the midst of postnatal depression, like a blankness that wasn't a good thing. It wasn't like a no self, as in I'm really at ease with it. It was, oh my God, I'm not even here. I'm not even, what am I? You know, it was that. And I think now looking back, that's really all tied up in identity, because it was a collapse of identity that left me like looking through the fragments of who I was, going, oh my God, I can't even put this jigsaw back together, because everything's changed like in that experience. And it was really disarming. And that, I felt profound loneliness in that time, definitely.
Mm. Yeah, my examples, and I was thinking about this for today, took me back to teenage years and early 20s, like being in a group of friends but feeling so lonely, so separate, and the kind of times when I might have been on my own genuinely, and you know, the world's all dark and awful, and you put on your sad mixtape of really sad songs and have a really good cry about how lonely you are. But in thinking about that, I was like, well, that's like really, that's like the wisdom of the system, isn't it? It's like when in those days you just went with it and you just were like, oh God, I'm so lonely in the depths of it, and despair of teenage angst. And so you would just like immerse into it and be all the sadness of lonely, sad songs and tears. But then no doubt, I mean, I can't know, obviously I can't even really know that happened. It seems like it happened. Presumably then I came out of it, and maybe the immersion fully into it helped that happen more easily. Whereas I wonder if we spend more time as we get older pushing that experience away, like, oh, I shouldn't be like that, and it shouldn't be like this, and so I'll try and avoid that sense of loneliness by working or finding friends all the time, or every opportunity I'll go to the pub because there's people there, and getting into those behaviours of avoidance because we no longer do the immersive teenage thing, and we equally perhaps haven't got to the point of seeing that experience of loneliness isn't here to tell you that you're really lonely and separate and just this one individual. They're here to tell you that it's not to be solved by finding other people and other activities to fill your time. It's the opposite, isn't it? It's to say none of those are needed. It looks like they are until we see through them, and then it's like, oh well, no, we're absolutely fine. There's a temporary belief of that story of I'm just this little me, and that fear in that moment is believed, and that disconnection is just that vroom, with just this little person. Inevitable separate loneliness.
And there may also be a fear in almost succumbing to those feelings, because it can feel like they're really overpowering, can't it? And I think that the rational or intellectual part of you that's feeling that fear is going, no, if you feel it, if you really feel it, it's going to take you over, and then you won't be able to cope, kind of thing. And that's the voice we're listening to when we're going, I'm too scared to face that loneliness, that feeling that's coming up in me. And yet, like you say, it's completely the opposite, is that if you give that the space, the presence, and just let it be, then naturally you can feel it and it doesn't overwhelm you.
It's also the point, though, that by going to feel it, you actually investigate the validity of it, you know, because there's also the identification of or, you know, if I allow myself to feel it, it means that I am alone. And we don't want that to be true. And so we have to go away and investigate that feeling and investigate that thought in some way and see the truth or untruth of it. Because it might be that on some level, oh yeah, I am alone because I'm not connecting with other people. I'm not going into the community. I'm not making friends. I'm isolating myself. You know, because there's always a part of you taking action to not to solve the feeling, because you can't solve the feeling, but to recognize, you know, what the direct experience is telling you, and also so that you can go and not challenge it, but just, you know, go and feel it and look into the depths of it, so that you can come out the other side of it and say, oh, okay, well, I didn't like that feeling. What do I need to do with it? How do I now take that suffering that I've had and use it in a way to to grow myself in some way. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know. I kind of think I get what you're saying, but I don't really see it like that. I see that when we go through the experience of loneliness and seeing it for what it is, it doesn't matter what comes out the other side of that sausage machine, if you like. It could lead to staying in the exact situation you are, with the exact activities you are, and now perfectly okay, and recognition of that okayness. Or yeah, it could absolutely lead to, yeah, now I'm going to join that community, now I'm going to go and talk to that person, now I'm going to go and write a letter, or it could be anything. And I guess that's the, because all our lives we've been stuck in the polarity of, oh, feels horrible, quick solve it. Feels horrible, quick solve it. And so the only investigation into it is seeing the untruth of it, and then let it go, because whatever then happens is what happens, and anything else is the intellect trying to make it be something that it thinks it should be.
No, that's right. It's the outcome of that investigation is not being tied to the outcome of that investigation, isn't it? But having to go do the investigation, and I suppose that's so much when we say there's work to be done, but that's the work to be done, is to allow yourself to have the direct experience and feel it and move through it. I'm not one of these people who say that we should just disconnect from all our feelings, and that was my problem was the disconnection from it. So I've disconnected from these feelings, and it's because I don't want to have them, so I'm going to put them over there somewhere. And because of it, there was that kind of body-mind disconnect. It was a disassociation with what was going on, and not being able to sit in it and say, okay, well, let's just sit in this. And Ram Dass talks about it as well. Is that have you actually gone away and felt lonely and just feel it and see what it feels like? So you said at the beginning, Natalie, it's not going to be as overwhelming as you think it's going to be. You'll still get through it and be here at the end of it, and notice it's a transitory experience. And it's not going to. It doesn't fundamentally change who you are, because it's not who you are.
And it's interesting. I don't know if anybody's ever had an experience of really high anxiety. I had a period where I was really, really anxious, and it created disassociation, which is like a clinical term that is that very thing you've just been talking about, where you separate yourself from it, because it's a design around self-preservation. But the interesting thing is here, it's actually flagging us to go, have another look, be gentle and curious, but have another look, because is that really true? Because while you stay away, it's just reaffirming an idea that there's something really to be scared of, and that actually you are that, like you said, Helen, a small separate entity. But that's not the case when you look closer.
And did you find that happened at the time, Nat, or is that something you see now? That
I didn't understand it at the time. I just knew that something was going on that was weird, and I didn't quite get. I wanted to understand it intellectually, but that was not the answer. I thought it was the answer, is to keep trying to make sense of what the experience was. It's only years later that I go, oh yeah, of course, that's what was going on.
And makes perfect sense. Again, it's like at that time that was the perfect thing for your system to do, in the belief that it couldn't handle that experience. Amazing to create disassociation. Like, how perfect is that? And then now for that to be seen so differently and knowing what's possible.
Yeah. I think Michael Neal talks about something similar. I'm going to get the analogy wrong, but he uses the analogy of a hairdryer for depression. Like, the fuse is gone, so your body naturally separates itself in order to kind of show you something and protect you at the same time. And it's the design of the system.
Yeah, it's so clever. And so it doesn't require us to do anything.
No, but we think we do, don't we? That's the irony of it all.
So how does this conversation tie in with the media and everybody talking about there being a loneliness epidemic?
Yeah, so there's something, we talked about social media actually in the last episode, but it came up and I was thinking about today as well, because there's been times where I've been part of social media communities and equally felt that loneliness and separation, and like, I'm not like them, I'm not part of the gang, and I wonder if as I said last time, like social media is an exaggeration of the human experience. And so again, it's like a brilliant opportunity that if social media is exaggerating that, it's a lovely loud alarm bell to go, no, like go through it, see it for what it is, see the untruth of the concepts that are around this, to see that loneliness isn't part of the experience of social media. Like, it's not an inherent, social media is not doing that to you. But for probably the majority of people, it would look like, if we're physically hanging out less, or if we're doing less community stuff, or if our lives are on social media, then oh gosh, yes, I feel lonely now because I'm not having that physical interaction. So clearly now I feel separate and disconnected, because there's that fundamental misunderstanding that connection relies on physical or face-to-face or local community, when the interconnection, the innate connection of everything and everyone, the more you see that, the more you see that whatever's happening on the surface doesn't say anything about that innate, and doesn't stop us then wanting to hang out or connect, but it's no longer from a desperate need to, I'll be okay when.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's a desperate need to fulfill some form of unidentified want or desire that you have inside of you. And then, if you're always coming from that place, you'll never feel it. You'll never feel that unidentified want or desire, because you can't, because it's a narrative, like you say, Natalie. It's a story that you're telling yourself, and the story can't complete itself. Can you continue in a cycle of being the same story?
A wild goose chase, isn't it? We're constantly just doing.
So this relates to. Sorry, I was just going to say this relates to what Graham said ahead of today about. He had a brilliant question, which I'm going to read so I don't get it wrong. Can there be loneliness inside of love?
That was a brilliant question. I didn't read that.
Lovely question.
Yeah. Which I think just really speaks to that innate connection of all of us, the oneness that we all are. That's love. That's permanent, constant. And in that space, there's not even an idea of loneliness. It's an entirely mind-made concept. Because to be lonely, you must be separate to start with.
Well, there has to be something that believes that it's separate to be lonely. There has to be a character that believes that it's separate from anything else to feel lonely, and it's that what you experience and your thinking is the idea of the character, the story, the narrative that you're telling yourself. And there can't be loneliness inside love, but there can be loneliness inside separation and personal love. There's definitely loneliness there because that exists in the duality of it.
And it's all part of the design. I would say that the experience of loneliness and apparent separation is just a longing back to source. It's a longing back to who we are. It's all allowable. It's all fine. So when you're experiencing it and you're thinking, this is not love, I don't want to be here, it's still love, but it's just through the aperture of a mind. That's all that's going on.
Yeah, exactly. I love that, Nat. And that's the same with everything, isn't it? Our seeking for connection, our seeking for joy, our seeking for peace that we've been seeking in the outside world and in others and in objects and in buying stuff and work and travel, and then seeing that no, it's that turnaround, because that seeking has been in the wrong direction, and turn around and see that behind you it's always been here.
I suppose sort of thinking, this is bringing up for me as well, it's like there's lots of times in my life where I've had this knowing that there's only me here, in terms of, but I used to think there's only me here in a kind of a separate sense of me, and not seeing that there is, because a client said to me once, it's like, oh, so we are actually, it's only just, we're truly alone, but in a sense of just being oneself, that you're truly alone because there is only one self. So from that sense, I said, yes, you're truly alone because there's just one self, but there's 7 billion of you that are representing it. So how can you be, alone within that space of 7 billion? Because there's 7 billion others that are reflecting it back to yourself when you see them, as well as all the other kind of animals and expressions of it as well. So within that foundation of love, when you stand on that foundation of love, then you can't be alone because everything is you. And, from a separate self point of view, then each separate self can be lonely on its own. But from a one self point of view, from the space of no separation, then I'm truly just one thing, and then everything else is also part of that one thing. So I can't be alone. There will never be a time that I'll be alone. And that doesn't mean, though, that you don't need people in the moment, and you interact with them, you need help, and you need other people to make connection with and be with and build bonds with and have friendship and relationships with. But it's like you say, coming back to that sense of source, is that what we're searching for, is that sense of source, that home feeling. And that home feeling always relies on the direct experience of it, even if the direct experience of it is, oh God, I feel alone.
Yeah. And it's the honesty of that, isn't it? Because what I really hear in what you're saying is the freedom that we rediscover when we know what we really are. Then the freedom of everything opens up, including going back to teenage wallowing in loneliness. Entirely fine. Or even just the very acknowledgement of it, isn't it? To go, God, I feel lonely. And then that's it. Like, what we've been so used to doing is God, I feel lonely, quick, I must fix it. And instead it just becomes, God, I feel lonely, and just the seeing of it and the experiencing of it. And then, okay, now I'm going to carry on with my day. And that might involve connecting with somebody, and it might not.
Yes, exactly.
It's back to that, doesn't matter what the form of it is. It's the touching back to home each time, isn't it? And sometimes that can only be done through the expression of the separate self experience.
Yeah, because the separate self experience is kind of like handling the practicalities of day-to-day living. Truly. And no, I've lost it.
What do you guys both see? So Lizzie said about what part does the physicality of human interaction play?
Good question.
Is it true? Is there a truth that we need physical interaction? Or is it just a really, really, really ingrained thought which makes us think we need it?
Well, is it two or is it one? I mean, it's physical interaction exists because it's part of being a human being, and at a body-mind level, the body-mind gets pleasure from human interaction. I mean, there is a release of chemicals and endorphins when I connect and interact with somebody, so that exists. But it's just it's the identification with the fact that I believe I need to be somebody to be happy. I need to have that in my life. And that's the difference, I think, is that from a body-mind perspective, then human interaction is important, and it's part of being a human being. But we're not the body-mind. We're something other than that. So it's important, at a human level. Of course, it's important. None of this says that we shouldn't have it, or we should not build community, or we've touched on this in other episodes. None of this says that those things aren't important. That hugging somebody, having connection, which is one of the worst things for this virus, isn't it? Is the fact that we were around friends last night and we hugged them because it was like, it's done now because we're around your friends. It doesn't matter. But just being out to hug somebody. Sent my daughter a message this morning just saying, I haven't seen you for ages. We just miss each other. Just not being in the physical space with people that you love is, it has an effect on the body. So you've got to recognize that.
It's interesting because I've seen people saying on various social channels like, oh, it's a good time for introverts because they're at home and they're quite happy to be that way. And there is a tendency for people to play out differently. We're all different flavors of the same thing, and I'm definitely a hugger, so I'm glad I've had like my family at home to hug, I'm really lucky in that respect. But yeah, I think
you're not getting bored of them though. Now I'm a bit bored of hugging the same people.
Oh no, I lavish on the hugs all the time.
Yeah, it's a thing I've seen consistently for myself and for friends as well. That just want to give people a hug. There was a great somebody, I can't remember which country it was, but they'd created like this plastic sheeting with plastic armholes on both sides, so that his daughter could hug her mum on Mother's Day, but they were like with plastic sheeting all around them, so there wasn't actually any physical contact. Brilliant ingenuity of the human mind when in times of necessity.
It's going to be really strange when the little ones go back to school, because I don't know how they're going to enforce social distancing on 4-year-olds. Because my daughter's a massive hugger. She's really tactile. So I think that's going to be really challenging.
Yeah.
Our school have said, no, just don't expect it. They're going to be in there.
Of course they are.
Little pods, but don't expect social distancing within the pod. That's just not going to happen, which is fine. I'd much rather that than be falsely, like they could be kept apart more easily when they're older in the classroom, but at playtime and stuff, just makes my heart break slightly to think they were all kept 2 meters apart during that time.
It's also the effect on how it trains people to interact with each other. It becomes a new way of interacting, a new way of training. I mean, it might be 20 years from now and we're all going to be sat here going, do you remember the times we used to shake hands when we met, and now we don't do that anymore? Or you don't have that human level interaction anymore, which is important. Again, I think we've got to have it, and we can't. Was that an appointment the other day? We couldn't shake hands with the person. It just feels. And I know that's thought again. Just it's me feeling that way. But there's an importance to it of being a human being. Is that we're a social animal, and as a social animal, we groom each other, touch each other, interact with each other, and that's who we truly are. So, as well as being the essence of ourselves, the spiritual essence of ourselves at the same time, and they both exist. So, we can't get away from that, and it's something that is important. And sometimes maybe the feeling of loneliness is the lack. They've said people lack of interaction, the lack of having a contact with somebody.
Yeah, and at the moment, I know it's really sad, but my friend was at a funeral last week and said she felt awful that she couldn't comfort somebody who was really upset. And that's the moment of that's an instinctive thing to do as a human, is to reach out to somebody who's really struggling. And that kind of magnifies the sense of that's, it's really hard, isn't it?
It just feels like it's another of these things which coronavirus is kindly showing us. So it's potentially giving us both the opportunity to see through the illusion of what we thought we needed. So let's just recognize that the experience of loneliness is a temporary, thought-created experience, in the belief that, in that momentary, I'm a scared, small person in this huge, big world with nobody around me, or nobody around me that cares or who gets me, which because you can be surrounded with people. It's an invitation to see through what can feel so real when you're in that moment, but it's really so transitory and so changeable. And at the moment that thinking changes, your experience changes. And therefore the chance to sort of drop back into that deeper truth of what's behind it all. And also, from a human experience level, it's then coming back in with that recognition of, God, we just really it's nice to hug each other, it's nice to shake hands, it's nice to have that physical human interaction with people other than your family. That's and then it's the fullness of all of it, but with none of the need and none of the fear. It's just this looks obvious to do. I'm going to take the chance just now while we're pausing, rather than us getting to quarter two.
A good idea.
Any questions? Just gonna, for anybody who's watching live, if you have got any questions, do just chuck them in as we go. But I guess we've got kind of like 15 minutes left. So if there's anything that you want to ask or share from your own experiences, then chuck them in, and we'll get to those before we finish.
I'll check the Facebook group.
It's that physicality thing, and Gary, you were saying about the epidemic of loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
I always struggle when it comes to scientific studies, but people would say there's scientific proof that people who are lonely die younger. And I wonder if that's related to what you were saying around, so we're not this body, but this body seems to do better in the presence of others, in the presence of those happy hormones.
Yeah, and I think you've hit right on the head there, is again, it's the misidentification with one, experience, two, thinking, and four, the body mind, three, the body mind. You know, it's just the body mind is not who we are, and so we identify with that experience, but the body mind exists as a, you know, it's the thing that exists between the timeless essence of ourselves and who we are and reality, and it's the bridge between the two. So, you know, because as soon as the essence leaves, we want to get rid of the body as quickly as possible, don't we? You know, we don't have like that lying around anymore, so we get rid of the body straight away. But the body mind, it has to have that that connection. It needs this connection with other people. It needs other people around it, and probably that's what you're pointing towards there. And I think you're exactly right. It's the body needs it. The body needs to have that experience, like the body needs water, like the body needs food, like the body needs comfort. The body needs that. It needs that connection itself. Who I am doesn't need it, because who I am exists beyond my thinking, beyond the body mind. But the body needs it. Of course, it does.
But could we say that some people would need it more than others, in terms of, there are some people who seem to be absolutely fine on their own, and perhaps now isn't actually that much of a challenge because they're just going about their business. Whereas for others, there'll be a real, I really miss my friends, I really miss, you know, the social aspect. Maybe, I don't know, is that?
Well, however it's playing out. Sorry, I was going to say, however, I mean, you can't escape your conditioning, your personality, your genetics. I mean, all of those are there. And however that pattern is playing out here is how it plays out. It always comes back to the identification of it, because it's in the identification that you get the suffering of it. And because we're all different expressions of that through this vehicle that we've got here, then yes, some people will, if they don't know who they are, then they will feel that they need it more than other people. But then obviously, probably there are also bodies that do thrive a lot better when they're in contact with other people, and have that connection. And I think it's so ingrained into the two, isn't it? I mean, it's very difficult to separate out.
Yeah. There's almost like, so if there was like, pretend there were levels, if there was like that, the ultimate level where there is the nothingness, in which there could never be loneliness because it's all love and it's all one.
Yeah.
Then there's like a level where, so perhaps in coming into this form, I need more hugs than you do. And without an idea of self, this body would just move to places to get more hugs, because that's what it seems to want. And then, Gary, like you say, then at the surface level comes in this idea of self and this narrative which says, oh no, you really need hugs, like you really won't be okay if you don't have hugs, and really must make sure you get them. And so then all the clinging and the tension around that is what maintains the confusion and maintains the searching within the objective world to find enough people to hug. And actually, most likely in that presence of that, there'll be nobody to hug. Actually just ramping up the experience till you see through it. It's like, no, really, this isn't the way to go to find more hugs. And so kind of saying the same thing, Gary, there's almost like that essence of each of us, which has a particular flavour, which has a particular preference, but equally also malleable. Like genetics, they're showing genes aren't static, they are affected by environment. Personality, that changes like the wind. again, we might have some tendencies, but there's no truth in it. So there's conditioning that can dissolve in a moment when we see something fresh around what's happened in our childhoods or experiences we've had. So there's so much more malleability in the world of form than we ever realised before. And it's only ever in the going through the concept and back into the formless that stuff all gets sorted out for itself.
And how cool is that? That something that looks so fixed and so solid and like a brick wall that you need to knock through, it just isn't, is it?
What would you say to people then who are finding this experience really lonely, whether right now or whether prior to isolation? What would be the invitation?
That's a good question. It's very difficult to give advice, from this position, from where I am right now, because I don't have any, one, because you don't understand the context of it, or and I can't give anybody any answers. I can't tell them what the answer is for themselves. Is that there's never an answer here. There's only a question and an invitation to go and explore. If that's what you said, an invitation. I mean, it's an invitation to go and explore your experience and go and. We always say this: look within, and the mistake is that we kind of look within the body for it, and we look within the experience for it instead of going within truth, and seeing, going deep into within truth and looking back beyond our mind, because we look for in and we think, oh, that means we go look within this, we go look within the brain for the answer. And the brain will never come up with an answer. The brain just comes up with more complexity and solutions and problems, and then tries to find solutions to the problems that it's just manufactured. So the invitation is to go back to your. I mean, I always talk about going back to direct experience of life now. Just go back to the direct experience and of the thing that is just doing the perceiving, and the thing that is experiencing, and the thing that is always present, and go back to that, and be that, which will mean that sometimes you experience uncomfortable feelings and sensations, and they may feel like they're going to be overwhelming, but they can't overwhelm who you really are, because who you really are is everything. It's the space. You can't be overwhelmed. A supernova doesn't overwhelm the universe when it explodes. It hardly notices it if it. So what's that? Yeah, exactly. It's like a fly landing on an elephant. I mean, it's just. So that would be my invitation. I don't know.
Yeah, and also maybe we always think those experiences are continuous and solid, and yet they never are. Because, like, going back to what you said about personalities, they fluctuate all the time. It's only the mind that makes the story about it being continuous. Therefore, like you say, go direct to your experience and notice the gaps when you're not feeling that, and then there's truth in seeing that, well, no, you're not lonely all the time, are you? And then that starts to question it, and then it becomes less solid, doesn't it? And that's the starting point, I think.
Yeah, and there's always a point when it's less solid, is that when that foundation feels like, that's the point where you need to commit to it. Because it's the running away from that feeling of less solidness as well. It's like, oh, I'm feeling, just because you're disintegrating as a center, because you're no longer tied to one kind of viewpoint or opinion of yourself, and then that starts to disintegrate, and of course it feels less solid as it disintegrates, and that is also going to feel uncomfortable and unnerving, but it's knowing that that's also happening within the space of who you are. So you're still here, and you'll still be here afterwards, and, as you said, that it's not going to be a continuous experience.
I'm really thinking with that as well, how just trust in it, like, because if you were to start exploring and staying with your experience, and perhaps feeling like, oh, this is different from normal, and this feels weird and uncomfortable or disintegrating, then if your body, like with your disassociation experience, that, you know, if your body goes, no, not yet, then it's, you listen to that and you follow that. Like there's no prizes for grit my teeth and really stay with this and until the whole, like, it's fine if you do that too, but you know, you do what you do, and you go as far as you go, and you notice what you notice, and there's nothing else that could ever happen. And including if you hear nothing from this conversation and you carry on how you've always done, like, that's perfect too. There's nothing really to change in any of it, because it will change as it changes. And yeah, the invitation is that, just bringing awareness to it. Let's raise it up into the light. Let's just see what's really going on.
Because that's all you really have at the end of the day, is conscious awareness, because that's all you really are. So, you know, and what we do is we use conscious awareness and we focus it on things. Like, oh, I'll just focus on that, so I focus on that. And, you know, there's that adage of energy goes where attention flows. So if your attention's constantly on your experience, is constantly on your thinking about your experience, then, you know, that's where you're going to identify. And if you identify with the thing that's just having the experience and move yourself, I mean, we're always using metaphors for this because it's not it, is it? We don't keep saying there's nowhere to go, there's nowhere to be, you're not going to get there. But, you know, you have to move yourself back. It's like, well, what does that mean? Do I take a step back? It's, you know, we're trying to point to that there's a part of you that exists beyond your thinking, and it is like a stepping back. It feels like that. What it feels like is a just step back and widen your attention and your awareness to take in more information, more data and more data points, and keep doing that, and keep moving back and moving back and moving back and moving back, and sitting in that experience. And the more you sit in that experience, then there becomes a realization of who you are. It's like, oh, I'm not the experience. I'm the thing that's having the experience, that's doing it's experiencing the experience. I'm all of it.
And in the seeing of that, then the experiences are so less frightening, because we're not defined by the experience. The experience is just passing through, and that's fine, isn't it?
Yeah, and you can't be it. Like when you start to create that space and see that, oh, well, I'm still here observing it, and a constant observation is happening, and in the meantime thought is fluctuating. Like I had some pain the other day, and I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna like really bring my awareness to that and notice it. And it's fascinating how it's then so ephemeral, and you can't pin it down, and it's like this moving, coming and going, and just nothing there. That's maybe something you could experiment with as well, if there's in the experience of loneliness, if there's a physical element to it. You know, look, bring attention to that physicalness of it, and again notice the constantness of the awareness and the movement of whatever the physical sensation is.
There's definitely a difference between analysis and investigation. So analysis is like, oh, am I feeling this? What am I feeling? What's wrong? What's going on? Why do I need to do it? What do I need to do to change? Yeah. Whereas investigation is like, oh, you know, what's this? What's that feel like? Like you say, it's like, where is it located? Oh, you know, can I find an edge to it? Can I find a boundary to it? Can I find a constant nature to it? Is it in everything? You know, is it just in one place? It's just, have I felt this before? Is it like other feelings? Is it just, you know, if I attach something to a feeling that's just passing through, that's, you know, be on its way without me doing anything with it? And so there's always this, you know, if you ever feel, because also when you feel lonely or you have that kind of sense of disconnection, there's a tension there as well. There's the tension of the separate self. So it's just relax and soften around that tension. I mean, because you can't be your true self when you're in tension. You just have to relax. And that's probably where the kind of stepping back comes through. It's just like, let's relax, take a breath, slow ourselves down, you know, be with it, hold it with compassion, and know that you're being held by something greater anyway. So that's also part of it.
You are the greater.
Yeah. You're holding yourself. Yeah. So it's like turtles all the way down, isn't it? That's the metaphor. It's like you're holding yourself all the way down.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing, this is it.
Mm-hmm.
Does anything come through on the chat?
No, people are being very quiet. So
my son might have been watching today. I'm really curious to go and find out if he actually has.
Not waiting.
I don't think any of us have sworn, have we?
No. I loved your analogy today, Gary. The elephants and supernovas. And yeah. I'm mixing metaphors.
Yeah. Elephants and supernovas. The title of the book, I think.
Good.
Good.
Cool.
Awesome.
We calling that a wrap?
I think we are. Mm-hmm.
Good. Well, how to close off? What are we discussing next week? Do we know?
Oh, no, we don't know.
No, maybe we can put that out to the community. Yeah, let's put that out to the community. That's if you're listening live, then give us a topic to discuss next week and put it in the group. If you're listening to this on the
if you're not listening to live.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're not listening live, you're listening. You're watching this video afterwards. Some things I'd like to say: please give us a like because YouTube and the algorithm loves that kind of thing. If you don't like it, give us a dislike as well because actually it's both the same.
But also we really appreciate the feedback. That's good.
We really appreciate the feedback. Really appreciate people just taking the time to do that. It really just helps other people find the message that we're putting out here as well. If you'd like us to talk about anything, then please share it either in the video, get in contact with us through the website, which is www.whatyou'vebeenlookingfor.com. We will have a Facebook group. If you don't know about that, then please go find us on Facebook. Again, you can find the link to Facebook through the website, and it's also in the YouTube video underneath. What else to say? Yes, and if you haven't signed up to the email, please also sign up to the subscription of the email because that really helps us as well. And so next week, hopefully, we'll be talking about something somebody suggested for us.
Or nothing.
Or nothing. Yeah, let's talk about no thing.
We can talk about that.
So yeah, we'll just sit here in silence for 40 minutes.
I have heard there is a podcast where they just sit in silence. I think it's only for a minute or two. I can't remember how long it was. But they, genuinely, the guy invites a guest on, and then they just sit in silence. That's quite cool.
That's cool.
Holding the space, definitely.
Yes, exactly. So yes, thank you everybody who's joined us live. Thank you people that listen to this afterwards, and thank you for everybody that's has interacted in the Facebook group. That has been a really nice space already, and please invite your friends, and they can bring a bottle of wine, and we'll have good
and their own mask.
Yeah, their own mask. We'll give out virtual hugs. Great.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Thank you
very much.
for listening.
Thanks.
Speak to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.